and with Krekar as its former leader or emir. In the year 2002, a TV documentary prepared by Norwegian state broadcaster NRK revealed to the unsuspecting Norwegian public that an Iraqi enjoying refugee status was actively engaged in armed groups fighting the ruling parties in faraway Iraqi Kurdistan. This initiated a heated public discussion in Norway. Anti-immigration and racist groups of all shapes and colors called for the immediate expulsion of the terrorist leader. An investigation into the activities of Ansar al-Islam and of Krekar himself was undertaken by several media groups. As a result of this publicity, the Norwegian government revoked Krekar's refugee status in February 2003 and declared its intention of extraditing him back to Iraq. This caused radical organizations and human rights groups to leap to Krekar's defense. They saw this as an attack on the rights of asylum seekers in general. The Liberal Party in Norway invited him to tell them about the problems facing political refugees in Norway. This was also the theme of a public meeting in the city of Stavanger, which had to be cut short when it was disrupted by angry Kurds throwing tomatoes and shoes at Mullah Krekar and accusing him of murder and other misdeeds. Angry liberals accused the demonstrators of undermining democratic rights. Amnesty International and several left-wing organizations, as well as a number of lawyers known for their spirited defense of refugees from oppressive states, were among the groups springing to Krekar's defense. Now, one reason for this was the general knee-jerk left-wing opposition to American foreign policy. At this time, the USA was preparing for the invasion of Iraq, and accusations against Krekar were by many seen as no more than American propaganda. American officials were seeking persuasive arguments for the attack against the Iraqi government, and they sought to establish links between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda. With his background in Pakistan and his connections to the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda, Krekar was suitable for the purpose. Sources in the PUK were happy to provide information on arms deliveries from the regime in Baghdad to the fighters in Beara. In this way, it was possible to establish links between Ansar al-Islam and Al-Qaeda on the one side, and between Ansar al-Islam and the Baathists in Baghdad on the other hand. However, direct links between Al-Qaeda and Baghdad were still lacking. In spite of the vocal defense from various groups of Krekar's right to asylum, criminal proceedings were launched against him based on the activities of Ansar al-Islam in Iraqi Kurdistan. The main basis of the prosecution's case was evidence given by the PUK and other Iraqi Kurdish sources. Krekar's defense lawyer, Brynjar Meling, was, however, able to undermine the prosecution by claiming that the main witness, the failed suicide bomber Didar Muhammad, had been tortured in the Abu Ghraib prison outside of Baghdad. The name Abu Ghraib at this time evoked strong feelings of revulsion. Abu Ghraib had become infamous through the publication around the world of extremely disturbing photos taken by American soldiers stationed there, showing their enjoyment at their own systematic abuse and humiliation of Arab prisoners. The prosecution withdrew its case, and Krekar was free to continue his activities and his life in Norway. However, the story doesn't end there. The next year, 2003, Krekar was again brought to trial, charged with financing terrorist attacks using Norway as a base. These charges also had to be dropped when it proved impossible to prove his connections with the terrorist attacks staged in Iraq by Ansar al-Islam. Krekar claimed that he had not been informed of the activities of the organization that he was head of. By this time, the Kurdistan regional government had requested that Krekar be handed over to them by the Norwegian government. But this request came up against Norwegian law, which does not allow the extradition from Norway of anyone facing torture or execution. The KRG was unable to guarantee that a death sentence would not be sought in any trial against Krekar, and was also unable to provide credible guarantees that he would not be subject to physical mistreatment while in custody in Iraq. So, Krekar remained in Norway, although the Norwegian Supreme Court in November 2007 ruled that his presence constituted a threat to national security, upholding the February 2003 decision by the government to deport him to Iraq. In the meantime, the United States Department of the Treasury designated Mullah Krekar as one of 5 individuals providing financial support to terrorist organizations. He was accused of providing funds for the Ansar al-Sunnah, a reincarnation of Ansar al-Islam. His name was also added to the United Nations Security Council's list of individuals belonging to or associated with al-Qaeda. All member states of the United Nations are obliged to freeze assets and prevent entry or transit through their territories for individuals included on this list. While these legal maneuvers were going on, Krekar's bearded figure became a symbol to many Norwegians of violent Islamism, and his case was constantly referred to as an example of the government's supposed inability to handle the Islamic threat. Public anger was mobilized against Krekar, which can be seen from the fact that in 2007 a Facebook group was set up to collect money to assassinate him. The first words in the group statement were, "For the murder of Norway's enemy number 1." Krekar didn't seem too much bothered by this. He continued to publish a steady stream of threats and insults against Kurds who opposed him, as well as against Norwegian government figures and others he perceived as enemies. In September 2008, he issued a fatwa against Marwan Halabjaei, claiming that he should be executed for authoring the book entitled Sex, Sharia and Women in the History of Islam. "I swear that we will not live if you live. Either you go before us or we go before you," said Krekar, comparing Halabjaei to Salman Rushdie and Ayaan Hirsi Ali. In 2010, Krekar issued another fatwa, this time targeting 3 other Kurds living in Norway who had been publishing on YouTube pictures of themselves burning pages from the Quran. According to this fatwa, killing these men was a duty for all religious Muslims. Kurdish organizations in Norway were provoked by this and demanded that Krekar be imprisoned. They were hard put to understand the protection he was given by the Norwegian legal system. The year before, controversy had erupted when Krekar was interviewed by an Arab television channel, the Al-Hiwar, and said that he wanted to establish a new Islamic caliphate in Iraq, claiming that for jihadists there is no legitimate state with the exception of the Taliban-led Islamic Emirate of Pakistan. As prospective leaders of his new Islamic superstate, Krekar named Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri and Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, as well as other radical Islamists. The Progress Party, a large right-wing party in Norway, and other right-wing groups in the Norwegian population continued to call for the expulsion of Krekar, or at the very least that he should be imprisoned. Hard-pressed by this seeming upwelling of public sentiment, the largest party in Norway, the Labour Party, balancing between the humanitarian wish to protect refugees and the need to show hard action against Islamist radicalism, they decided to form a special task force to examine whether people officially labeled as dangerous to national security could be imprisoned. Further strange episodes followed. In January 2010, shots were fired through the windows of Krekar's apartment, and Krekar's son-in-law was mildly injured. The attack was investigated by Norwegian police as an assassination attempt. Krekar and his lawyer Brynjar Meling accused the PUK of having ordered the attack. Krekar also continued to pronounce his opinions on the politics of Iraqi Kurdistan, saying that he would support Kurdish independence wholeheartedly, that although he had lost faith in Kurdish parties. However, he claimed he had no quarrel with any political party in Kurdistan, that many of his relatives and friends were members of the PUK and the KDP, and he had no issues with the KDP or any other party in Kurdistan. Krekar repeatedly stated that he wanted to return to Iraq to fight against the Iraqi government and the ruling parties in Hawler, if the Norwegian government would only provide him with the necessary travel documents. In early January 2012, Krekar announced to Rudau that he would be leaving Norway and returning to the Kurdistan region soon, saying, "My return to the Kurdistan region has become a major political issue." A prominent member of the Norwegian Progress Party, the politician Per Sandberg, stated that he would be glad to personally pay the tickets for Krekar to leave Norway for good. However, no travel documents were issued. What created the most stir, however, was an additional statement in this interview. A statement which was regarded as a death threat against the Norwegian Prime Minister. Krekar was reported to have said, "My death will cost Norwegian society. If, for example, Erna Solberg, that is the Norwegian Prime Minister, throws me out of the country and I die as a result, she will suffer the same fate." For this and other threats, Krekar was eventually brought to court once more. In February 2012, Krekar confirmed in the Oslo District Court that he had issued a 20-page fatwa against the author Halabjaei. The fatwa was sent to several hundred Islamic scholars around the world. However, Krekar said he thought he might be able to guarantee the safety of Halabjaei, but he confirmed that his fatwa implies that it is permissible to kill Halabjaei in Oslo or anywhere else. He compared Halabjaei to Theo van Gogh, the film director who was killed by an Islamist in the Netherlands in 2004. On the grounds of all these threatening statements, Krekar was sentenced to 5 years in prison in March 2012. He was arrested by the Norwegian Police Security and Norwegian police and put in jail. At this time, certain additional statements came to light that were uttered by followers of Krekar who might take retaliatory action against Norwegians if his prison sentence were implemented. Now, all this shows that Krekar was utilizing the Norwegian legal system to the full, with the able assistance of Brynjar Meling, a star lawyer in Norway. All the time, the Norwegian government was paying the expenses of the court trial and the very high expenses demanded by Brynjar Meling. However, in 2012, Krekar's prison sentence was reduced from 5 years to 2.5 years, but he was ordered to pay a substantial amount of compensation to each of the 3 Kurds that he had threatened. He served duly 2 years and 10 months in sentence, and he was released from prison in January 2015. However, Krekar complained about his prison conditions and claimed Norwegian prisons were worse than those in North Korea. The prisoners that Krekar's followers had kept in Iraq would, of course, not have been amused. Further complications followed upon his release. In February 2015, Krekar had praised the attackers of the French magazine Charlie Hebdo, saying that when a cartoonist tramples on our dignity, our principles, and our faith, he must die. This and other similar statements caused Krekar to be sentenced once again, this time to 18 months in prison. Krekar and his lawyer protested vigorously, but to no avail. At the present moment, in May 27, he has been released after serving this second sentence. Now, in spite of, or because of, his public notoriety and his many appearances in court, Krekar has been able to build a following among Kurds, Somalis, and other Muslims in Norway for his special brand of violent Salafism. But there are no indications that he has acquired or even sought a follower within the ethnic Norwegian population. A group of young Muslim men calling themselves the Prophet's Ummah, mostly 7 second-generation immigrants, have claimed to support Krekar, but no organizational link between the Prophet's Ummah and Krekar have been indicated. However, the Prophet's Ummah has been linked to a handful of Norwegian jihadis traveling to join Daesh in Syria. It is known that a small number of these have been killed in Syria and Iraq, and Norwegian government lawyers have been discussing the legal complications linked to their status if and when they return to Norway after taking part in illegal armed groups in the Middle East. A fresh round of international investigations against Krekar started in the spring of 2016, connected to a web-based radical group accused of radicalizing and recruiting fighters for Daesh, planning attacks against Norwegian and British diplomats in the Middle East, and making preparations to establish a caliphate in Iraqi Kurdistan. The group was also suspected of operating military training camps. The Italian anti-terrorism chief Giuseppe Governale said the operation involving police and security officials in several European countries was the most important police operation in Europe in 20 years. A total of 17 people in 5 different countries, all except one of whom were Iraqi Kurds, were arrested or indicted in the raids. A number of properties were searched and officials seized electronic devices and documents. However, in March of 2016, all suspects in the UK were released without charges after winning a court case that being extradited to Italy would breach their human rights. I'm almost finished. According to the investigation, however, it was established that Krekar had pledged allegiance to Daesh in 2014, just like Ansar al-Islam had done. The story of Krekar also has its humorous aspects. In January 2004, the female comedian Shabana Rehman approached the mullah at a public meeting, folded her arms around his legs and lifted him off the ground. Krekar exploded in anger at this insult to his dignity and threatened her in his usual way. Another strange aspect is the Norwegian government's attempt to force Krekar to live in a rundown asylum center in a small village of Syrkseterøra, 500 kilometers north of Oslo. Now, this whole situation exposes a number of difficult questions for a democratic society. How do we treat people who want to destroy democracy? Even though his attitudes are well known and he has been jailed on many occasions, it has not been possible for Norwegian authorities to imprison Krekar permanently. He has utilized the Norwegian legal system, which provides him with first-class legal assistance at government expense to his fullest extent. However, I believe it is vitally important that an open and vital society like Norway does not abandon its humanist values in such a confrontation. If democracy should stoop to the level of jihadism, then the open society would have lost and Mullah Krekar would have won. Precisely by generously offering people like Krekar the protection of universal law, we prove the supremacy of the open and liberal society. Thank you.
Thank you very much.